Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar today, Building Bridges, Managing Translations with Adobe Experience Manager Guides and XTM Cloud. We have a nice agenda, what we want to talk about today. Of course, first we will introduce ourselves, and then we will talk about the power of DITA XML for global content. We will talk about creating global-ready intelligent content with AM guides, and how to plug translators into your content flow with the XTM Cloud. Then we will give you a short demo of both solutions, AM Guides and XTM Cloud, and how to build this bridge to the world with AM Guides and XTM Cloud. And in the end, we will have some Q&A session. My name is Stefan Gentz. I'm the Senior Worldwide Evangelist for Adobe Technical Communication. And with me in the room today is John Weisgerber from XTM. Hi, John.
Hi, Stefan. Thanks to you and Adobe for hosting today. I'm really excited to be here. I'm what we call an XTM expert. Basically, I'm on our solutions team. I've been in the localization business for longer than I'd care to admit. I've worked as a translator, project manager, machine translation developer, you name it, and then spent the last 6 years on the TMS side, focusing on translation management technology.
Awesome. We will talk about the power of DITA XML for global content. And John, there's in this beautiful slide that you have created, you have this wonderful quote from Anne Rockley. Intelligent content is content that's structurally rich and semantically categorized. It's late in the evening for me, sorry. Therefore, automatically discoverable, reusable, reconfigurable, and adaptable.
Yeah, it's a tongue twister to be sure.
It's a long sentence from Anne Rockley with a lot of keywords in it, a lot of terms when we talk about translations. What is your take on this quote, or why did you choose that quote?
It's a great encapsulation of the power of DITA for building intelligent content. Many people are familiar with topic-based authoring, structured documentation. These are concepts that have been around for a long time that give you a lot of great efficiency in authoring and publishing content through reuse, kind of the write once, publish everywhere concept that's structurally rich, reusable, reconfigurable, and adaptable, all of that. The movement has kind of grown towards intelligent content now as people have realized that not only the content that you deliberately build for marketing purposes, but your technical documentation, your user helps and manuals all become effectively marketing content when they're online in the cloud. If people can find them easily, and that's the discoverable part. And then if you can, manage all of this complex content effectively, right? And DITA is really the primary open source platform for that. It's a framework that enables you to build structured, intelligent content. And the value, once you start creating global content, all the efficiency savings that you get from building structured content is really just magnified exponentially when you start to go global in all the different target languages. So it's a really fantastic framework, which of course is why Adobe added it to AEM.
Right. And for those of you who don't know what DITA is yet, DITA stands for Darwin Information Typing Architecture. And the icon is, by the way, a small Darwin bird. And the idea of that is that DITA has a very special power, and that is inheritance. You can specialize elements and attributes in DITA and create your own element names and own attribute names, and they inherit the role of the element they were specialized from. And that's a pretty unique feature in DITA and pretty unique in the XML world. This concept, and that gives you a lot of power to customize DITA also for your own specific needs and requirements in your structured content scenario. Originally invented by IBM, and later on, as it was very successful at IBM for their own documentation needs, they handed it over to the OASIS committee. That's an international standards committee. And today, DITA is maintained by the OASIS DITA committee and continuously developed forward into the future. So very widely and broadly adopted XML standard, and I would say, and I guess you will probably agree with me on that, John, that DITA is today the biggest and most important XML standard for technical documentation.
I'd say so, absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Okay, let me give you a quick solution overview of AM Guides. Adobe Experience Manager Guides, that's our DITA CCMS. So it's not just a CMS, like a web CMS, it's a component content management system, a CCMS. And it's built on AM, on the AM platform, and you can use it to manage all your technical documentation content, all your long-form content, and even in marketing, people are using it for long-form content today, like blogs and things like that. So it's getting a little bit broader beyond technical communication or technical documentation use cases. People create knowledge bases with AM Guides. They create support portals with it. So a lot of use cases you can use that CMS for. And that is also possible because it's embedded in the AM platform or part of the AM ecosystem, which consists of many solutions like Adobe AM sites for the website content management, AM assets for your asset management needs, like things like Adobe Target for personalizing content, Adobe Analytics, and of course then there are shop systems like Magento and so. So it's a large ecosystem, and AM Guides is one part of that ecosystem and can leverage the power of all these other components in the ecosystem as well. And that makes it very unique and powerful as well. Basically, it's a platform to manage and review your content, to author your content. And there's a web editor built in where you can create your content, write your content with a powerful Visvig and source code editor. You can tag your content. You can search through your whole content repository. Of course, there's versioning included as well, so you can create multiple versions of one topic and track the history of a topic and see what has changed between the versions. There's a full workflow management built into AM where you can visually design workflows in a flowchart way of working and assigning people to certain steps and tasks in your authoring and management and review and translation process. There's a full online review embedded, and you can invite reviewers to review your content, and that all works in the browser. And of course, there's a full translation management built in that then perfectly connects with XTM, as we will see later. And of course, there are a lot of reporting functionalities. So it's a platform to author, manage, review, and translate your structured content. And at one point, you, of course, also want to publish that content. And there's a huge publishing framework included. You can publish, of course, directly to AM sites with Adobe Web Content Management System. You can use FrameMaker Publishing Server, FMPS, or the DITA Open Toolkit. Alternatively, create HTML5 websites, responsive HTML5 websites. Of course, you can use FrameMaker Publishing Server and DITA Open Toolkit also to publish to PDFs. You could have your FrameMaker publishing templates and create PDFs through FMPS. And of course, you can even publish to mobile apps and EPUBs and Kindle, Amazon Kindle, and a lot of other output formats. And you can also use, you see that at the bottom, the brand new native cloud PDF engine from Adobe, where you can visually design your templates for your PDF right in the browser, right in AEM Guides, and I will quickly show you that in the live demo. And publish your PDFs, and you don't need DITA Open Toolkit for that. You don't need any coding for that, no XSLFO development, etc. You can do all that in the browser. And of course, there are comprehensive APIs for content as a service. There are REST APIs. You can publish to CRM platforms like Salesforce, Lightning, to a lot of other knowledge bases. From Adobe itself, we have a nice knowledge base template, but you can also connect to other knowledge bases that are not from Adobe. And you can use the APIs to connect with IoT apps and embed your content with Industry 4.0 scenarios, with machines, with car displays, augmented reality glasses, whatever. These external applications can then use the content that you host and manage in AEM Guides. Very interesting use case scenario that we have shown a couple of times in DITA World and other conferences. And as I mentioned, it's all part of the Adobe ecosystem. So you have things like Adobe Target and Adobe Analytics, where you can actually measure the performance of your content and see how many people are reading my topic, how often is it accessed, and things like that. And with Adobe Target, you could even personalize the content of your support portal even more and display certain topics based on certain audiences, etc. But you do not always start immediately with DITA. You might have a lot of legacy content in other formats. And for this, we have built in a huge content ingestion framework. We can migrate your existing content into AEM and into DITA. So basically, things like Microsoft Word documents, you can just drag and drop them into AEM, and they will automatically get converted to DITA. That's if it's a halfway good structured Word document, the results are really good. Otherwise, you might have a little bit of post-editing effort to fit it to the structure of DITA. But usually, if it's a well set up technical documentation document in Microsoft Word, the migration is usually quite smooth. You can, of course, migrate XHTML content, HTML5 content, XHTML5 content especially. You can transform your existing XML content, which might be non-DITA. Also, there's a mapping mechanism that you can use to transform your existing XML into DITA. Let's say you're coming from some content management system, which is maybe using DocBook or maybe using some proprietary XML standard from that vendor, then this content can also be get migrated into DITA. You can even upload IDML documents from InDesign and convert them to DITA. Of course, you can inject DITA. If you're already working with DITA, it's a very easy migration path for you because you can just drag and drop your DITA content into AEM, and it will automatically manage there, and you can continue working in AEM. And you can even upload things like Markdown files, and they will be converted to DITA. And as desktop, if you don't want to work with a web editor that is built into AEM, but prefer to work with your existing editor, then you can continue to use FrameMaker. There's a repository manager in FrameMaker with an AEM connector where you can browse through your whole repository and check in and check out files and version files, etc. There's also a connector for Oxygen. So if you're working with Oxygen, you can also work with AEM as your content management system, but with Oxygen as your desktop editor. So all these possibilities are there. And all that is, or a lot of that is powered by Adobe Sensei, our AI and machine learning engine from Adobe. And more things coming also into the technical documentation field with AI. Things like automatic suggestion of what you write based on the text corpus that you have, things like that. So a lot of interesting things are coming there. And of course, it's already there in AEM Assets for things like automatically tagging content with what we call smart tags. Okay, so much for the AM Guides solution overview. Let's talk about XTM, John.
Yes, thank you. So really quickly, XTM is an enterprise translation management system for those of you who aren't familiar with it. So it's obviously a great pairing with Adobe Experience Manager, which is an enterprise level CMS for website content, and now with guides for your DITA content, which can encompass just about everything that you might author. So what we mean by enterprise TMS, I won't spend too much time on this, is that it's a translation management system that is scalable enough and flexible enough to handle all of the translation activities throughout your entire organization, not just your website, technical documentation, but everything else as well. So it's a all-in-one integrated system in the cloud with your translation workflows, file filters, your online CAT tool, translation memory and terminology assets, everything built into one system. And of course, a key aspect here, as we're demonstrating today, is the connections, the integrations with other enterprise apps like AEM. So we have, XTM has, I don't know, I think we have the most connectors off the shelf in the market, over 40 connectors to various CMSs, and they're making new ones all the time. So XTM handles everything that takes place during the translation process from the time the content is submitted from a CMS like AEM out to XTM for translation, automatic vendor assignment, real-time translation editing in the cloud, and returning those files back to the CMS. Next slide, please, Stefan. We do have, so on top of that, we've been talking up DITA and how powerful and important it is in the industry. So XTM does have some specialized features for DITA content. As Stefan has already explained and will demonstrate to you more shortly, the power of structured content means that what you have typically in a document is a lot of small components that make up any given document or site or even user interface. They'll be organized by maps. We call DITA maps in DITA. That tells the publishing system what order to place all these tiny little components, right? That's what enables you to just, the component is how you can edit once and publish everywhere and reuse that content. So the problem when it comes to translation typically is that you've organized all your source content carefully in a structured content model like DITA, and then you send all that stuff out for translation, and all the translators get is a raft of 1,000 or so small component files that are all disentangled and disconnected from each other, and it makes getting a quality translation back a little bit difficult. So what XTM does is, out of the box, and this is not tied to the AEM connector necessarily. These are DITA-based features that live in XTM, but of course you can take advantage of them. We parse the DITA map. When you send us a DITA project and it's got a DITA map and all of its components, we read the DITA map and we organize the content in the order of the document. And you can see a little example in the screenshot on the right there of us parsing a DITA map. This is the navigator view in XTM itself. So this alone gives the translator some context, better context about what they're translating, because at least the component items are organized sequentially as they would appear in the desired document. As I mentioned, a lot of these, this particular screenshot example is there's 32 component files that make up this quick start guide. It's quite common, especially for larger documents, to have many more components. You'll see them in the hundreds and thousands. So, and a lot of them are very small. A lot of them will contain just a couple sentences. So to better manage all of that content for translation, XTM also allows you to combine the components into larger chunks to better manage your translations. But again, they will be contextual chunks. So in that screenshot on the right, you can see kind of the hierarchy. There's levels of the hierarchy through the DITA map. The broader document, perhaps some sections, chapters, or what have you, and you can drill down to different levels to all the little components. XTM lets you define what level in the document you want to combine these components into chunks. You can you can have the whole document combined into one file for translation. But in contexts where you have a very large document, your translators may need to divide that among themselves in order to get it done by the deadline. We've all been there. So it might be helpful to have chapter level chunks or section level chunks. So XTM lets you combine those for the purposes of translation. That gives, again, contextual chunks of translation for the vendors. And then when the project is complete, what's returned to AEM is all the individual components in the structure that they originally came out of. And the last part is we enable visual in-context translation for DITA content and XTM. And the way we do this is using similar technologies to the way that you publish your DITA content to begin with, which is a set of style sheets that transform that underlying XML structure via the DITA maps into a particular document for print, for web, for UI display, whatever it may be. These style sheets can be embedded in your XTM account that tells us how to render your DITA content in the translation tool in the workbench so that the translators have full visual context of what they're translating while they're translating it. So these are exciting DITA features that we have built into XTM.
Cool. I especially like that navigation view that you have there. That makes it so much more easy for translators to understand what they are translating and in which context that is. Which you get, as you mentioned, you might get a lot of small components, and then as a translator, it might be really difficult to understand these 200 small components and what is the context of them, where are they used, etc. And this navigation view from the DITA map is basically the same that the author is seeing in AEM in the DITA map view that I will show you. So
exactly. It's all about bringing that context forward in the workflow so that ultimately you get a better quality translation the first time around. You reduce these kind of QC cycles you have to go through where things get translated, you come back, you do a publish, and you go, oh, this isn't right. And then you have to go all the way back to the translators and back and forth. It just costs time and money.
Right. Cool. Let's jump into action and show you both solutions in a short live demo. And what you see here is the welcome login screen from AEM. So I sign in with my Adobe account here. Select my personal account. And then I need to approve that on my iPhone here. Double authentication. And I'm signing in, and where I land then is the welcome page of AEM, the main navigation. And you have basically two components here on the left side in the menu. This is the main navigation, and here's the configuration. We can configure everything in AEM, but I will not go into that today. There's a specific section for Adobe Experience Manager Guides where you can do things like DITA profiles. You can create your folder profiles for individual users with specific settings, etc. Can configure the document states like authoring, review, translation, and can extract DITA metadata from DITA files. You have access to the bulk publishing dashboard and the publish dashboard, etc. Here in the main navigation, we have guides. That's the DITA CCMS we're talking about today. But you can also manage your projects. You will see that probably in the live demo from John later. You have access to AEM sites, where the site website configuration happens and where you can design your websites. You have experience fragments. You have assets, the full asset management system. You can have access to personalization and to content fragments. All your DITA content is managed in AEM assets. So let me quickly go into assets and give you a very quick idea of how that looks like here in files. I have my content tree here. And I have my folder Stefan. I can go into that. And here in Stefan, I've organized my content. The rest is from colleagues and other departments, etc. And I have, for example, the folder samples. and my famous smart security guide that I will also use in my demo. And there you see German is still empty. There's nothing to display. And in English, I'm organizing my English content, so my DITA map. I have all my topics in there. I have some additional resources in there. And I have my images in there. So, for example, these images that I used in my technical documentation here. In that asset management system, I can also have a preview of this image, and I can handle pretty much every image format that is important today. And I can even go to the properties of that asset and have all these metadata options here, like the title that I can define, a description, what that image is, if that image is language specific, also important for translation. I can add tags manually here. And these smart tags are what Adobe Sensei has already added. I can see if it's in a review, some other things like write and hide. I can define the document state from AEM guides, like draft, edit, and review, approved, reviewed, and done, and so on. And I could even do things like targeting it for specific dates, that image. So let's say I have a website and I want this image to appear only in a certain time frame, then I can schedule an activation and deactivation of that image. So very powerful asset management features. Just a quick idea of that. And then I go back to AM guides. So I'm going out here, out of my assets folder. And here on the left side, upper left side here, I have AM guides, and I go into that now. And here on the left side, I have my navigation. I have favorites. I have my repository view, where I can browse through that repository that you have also seen in AM assets. I have my acrolinks bar. I have my map view, an outline view where I can see the structure of a document. I have reusable contents. I have my glossary, so I can create my own glossary for my documentation here. I can work with conditions like products or audience, and define audiences like internal audience, external audience, end consumer, or administrator and end user, or Europe and America and Asia, or whatever. I can define my audiences as I like, and then assign these audiences to my content even on a very granular level. I can also work with subject schemes, and I can work with snippets. Subject schemes are important if you want to have a very strict control over what kind of content is created in your system. And you could do things like allowing the author only to insert values in meter and not in inches, and things like that. And you can then verify your content on these things. And in snippets, you can create sort of small templates for authors, where the author can insert that snippet into a DITA topic or task, and then just it's already pre-populated, so to say, with some content, and the author just needs to type in the content then. Here's a small preview of the XML of that snippet. And you can also create your own templates for topics and for your maps, etc., like the book map or user guide template map. You can create your own topics for glossaries and references, and maybe already pre-populate them with specific content, so that your subject matter experts only need to type in and fill in the content and don't need to deal and work with XML or DITA at all. Let me go to the repository view here. I have my folders here, like content import. This is the place where I just drag and drop my Microsoft Word documents to convert them to DITA. I have my demo folder. I have my output folder where I publish my content like PDFs. I have a resources folder where I have, for example, fonts included that I want to use in my PDF output or web output. And I have my samples. And here I have my smart security guide again. And this is the one we are going to translate. And as you can see, I only have it in in English, but not yet in German. The German folder is still empty. This is the DITA map that we were talking about earlier. And the DITA map looks like this. So I have things like some keys, think of them like variables. I have my, so to say, subfolders in my documentation. You can think of a DITA map a little bit like a book file where you sort all your things like table of contents and front matter and index and the chapters, so to say, themselves. I have chapters like introduction, description, installation, administration, scenarios, maintenance, troubleshooting, and Smart Security Pro here in my DITA map. And in there, I have my topic like intended use. That's part of my introduction here. Or a description. I have a description of the graphical user interface, the camera details, the smoke detector details, etc. Or installations like installing the application, and then on Android, on Windows, on Linux, and Mac, and so on. So in this DITA map, I basically organize my technical documentation and all the components of my documentation here. And let me go to one of these topics, intended use. And there you, in the center now, you see the web editor of AM Guides with my own style sheet. And you would see here at the top, I have some breadcrumb navigation with section and P and UL and LI, which automatically updates based on, depending on where my cursor is in the document. And here on the left side, in the outline view, I have the structure view of my document with these sections here. And I can browse through the content of my document with these entries in the structure view here, the outline view. So this is my DITA topic. I can just click here and type. Yeah, so I don't need to know anything about XML yet, and maybe never. I can just use it as an online editor where I can add paragraphs, I can insert lists, I can insert bulleted lists. I have a table, can insert tables with a simple insert table dialog. I can insert images and just browse through my asset management system, AM Assets, and say, okay, I want to go into my Smart Security Guide here, images, and select one of them and say click and select, and then this image will be loaded, and I can give it a figure title like screenshot and an alternate text like this image shows the software or whatever. Accessibility content, and then I can insert that topic into my DITA topic here. So very easy authoring and editing, but there's a lot more in there. I can also insert audio files, video files, YouTube videos, Vimeo videos. Of course, I can create cross-references inside my document or to some other document in my DITA map, or even to some topic in some other documentation. I can insert web URLs. I can even insert an email link if I want to have an email link, even in my PDF maybe, and then I could insert that here, or when I have an email on the website, I could also pre-populate it with a subject. Please help me with this document. Software. And then give it some body text and some display text, etc. So very easy way of inserting all kinds of references, including key references, where I can reference keys in DITA. Think of them like keywords. Or I could even use content references and reuse content that I have somewhere else in the system. Maybe in some other topic, maybe in some other documentation, maybe in some sort of a content repository. I, in this case here, have a warnings DITA file where I have a couple of warnings, and these are two warnings that I need to reuse all the time, and I can just select them here and then insert that content into my topic. So think of it like a referenced image. I'm not referencing an image, but I'm referencing a whole paragraph, or maybe a table, or maybe just a single word, or a whole topic. So I have all these content reuse possibilities. And that's very cool, because you don't need to copy and paste content all the time. Think of that legal paragraph with some legal warnings. And right now you might reuse that content by duplicating it and then implementing it into the next documentation. And here you have some single place where you manage that legal paragraph that is used across all your documentations. And when it needs to get updated, you just need to update it in one place, and not in 10 documentations or hundreds of documentations, and maybe even more with translations. You can also insert snippets, the small templates that I talked about. You can lock and unlock your file for editing, so that it's only checked out by myself here. I also have a text view. So if I'm a little bit more on the XML side, I can use these texts here and collapse them and expand them and have these sections, for example, here. And in my document itself, I can do these things like collapsing content and expanding content. And especially when you work on a little bit longer content, that can really make a difference and can really make it more easy. You have, of course, things like track changes, which you can enable and disable. You can also merge two different documents into one document, or merge versions. You also have a version history management, where you can see differences between two versions of that document here. So here I see it's version 1.0, and it shows me the differences compared to version 1.1. So a lot, all these things are there. You have tracking. You can see who created this version and did these changes. If you have multiple users, or if you have some scenario where you need to be able to track the history of a document, here's the place where you can do that. And you can create version labels and label that version with a specific name. And you can also create review tasks from here. This is a very simple way to author your content. And you might wonder what this yellow and this reddish, orangish highlighting here is. You can see when I click into that, you see here on the right side, this paragraph, 3 cameras, has an attribute platform with the value Linux. That means this content is specially attributed to be for a specific platform. And think about creating content for multiple versions of your software, or of your hardware, or whatever, or any other product, basically. Or you create this content for different audiences. You don't need to create one user guide for, let's say, the administrator or the end user, and then a second user guide for the administrator, by basically duplicating the content and changing some things there and taking some paragraphs out, putting some other paragraphs in. You can do all that here in the browser in one topic as one single source of truth, and then just create different versions of this documentation out for different audiences. Or if you have a publishing to web portal, which allows more interactivity, like a support portal, you could have checkboxes so that your users see, oh, I only want to see the content for version 2.0, or I want to see the content from version 1.0, because I'm still on an older version of the software that I have bought from you. And you can make it more easy for users to see the content they want to see and need to see based on their requirements. Or you could pre-filter that out. So that's up to you. Of course, it's not only a WYSIWYG editor, it's also a powerful source code editor, where you have the XML source code available here. And you see here my list element with the audiences internal and my product names, etc. And I can add additional content here if I want, and if I'm a little bit more on the XML side and prefer that. Personally, I always write in this XML source code view because I just like it. And this is another list item. I can do that here as well. And I get these nice context-sensitive cells and say audience in this case is, yeah, I know I need an attribute value, and insert my audience like external. Yeah, and then I can go back to my author view, and I have my other list item here. And the audience attribute is external. It's very easy to assign and personalize this content. And there's also one that is interesting for us today with the translation, and that's the translate attribute. And I can say translate no or translate yes. And with that, I can include and lock content, include or exclude content in the translation process. And John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think XTM handles these translate attributes as well, and can then expose that content or gray out that content for the translator or include it, right?
Absolutely. XTM utilizes internationalization tag set or ITS rules. So some of this, like translate equals no, will work out of the box, but XTM's file filters are also easily customizable. The audience example you've given is really outstanding, is a great example. You can have you could build rules into XTM if you have internal only content mixed in your DITA, then we can identify those using that, again, that structurally, semantically rich metadata to exclude those from translation or highlight only a particular audience-facing content for translation in a given style.
Awesome. I knew XTM would be able to do that. You have also that properties panel where you see the state of your document, like in review. And I see references, where is my topic used, to which other topics is it referencing, and things like that. So I have my content dependency overview here. And of course, I also have a review panel implemented right into my authoring environment here. So if I start a review, which I have already started for this topic earlier, and assigned my colleague John Doe, which is actually not my colleague, but it's my John Doe, my reviewer, and he is reviewing that content. And John is sitting somewhere else in the world, in a different browser, in a different machine, and just pulls up the URL, starts reviewing the content, and I see that whatever John is doing as a reviewer there, I see that popping in here in real time, live, and I can also chat with John and need to check this. And I can basically chat with John on our comments, and he can then reply to me and say, yeah, okay, great. So very, very powerful online review functionality built in here as well. Yeah, track changes if I would have some, and if I would use Schematron, I could also see the validation results here. Of course, I at one point also want to output my content. And I have my PDF presets here and my knowledge base template, etc. And the PDF engine is really, really powerful. That's the new cloud-based PDF engine from Adobe that I mentioned earlier. We can configure everything that is possible with PDF today. So everything that you might use, know from InDesign or FrameMaker and Acrobat itself, you can do all of that here. I don't want to explain all that because then it gets really too long for today. But you can do everything like setting passwords or doing document restrictions and allow printing or disallow printing, things like that. You can even create accessible PDFs, enable JavaScript to create a more interactive PDFs, embed fonts, and even important things for prepress, like using PDF standards like PDFX4 to create pre-press ready PDFs. So a lot of possibilities there. And what I really like here is you can also create your own designs. And it's a visual designer here where you can define templates for all the components that you might have in a publication, like a table of contents, list of figures, list of tables, and so on. And here on the left side, you can go into them and visually design them in the browser. And this is a cover page that I created for LavaCon conference a few weeks back. And I do all that here, and I can select everything from font family and font weights and number of columns in a text. So it's a full-fledged template designer where I can do all that here right in the browser and don't need to do any XSLFO coding or XSLT coding or worry around with creating plugins for DITA Open Toolkit and things like that. It's all here in the browser. The more geeky people can even go into the source code here and change the code here. They can go into the style sheets. All that is CSS based, of course, with CSS3 print. So you can do all the magic that CSS allows. And if you give that to a CSS developer, you will probably have a hard time to find an XSLFO developer, and even more so an affordable XSLFO developer. But CSS developers, that's the language of the web. So the whole internet all websites are based on HTML5 and on CSS. So it's very easy to find skilled people, a lot of forums, if you really want to go into that code level. Otherwise, I usually prefer just creating the styles here in the visual designer and set up my styles here for the different types of content that I have. Yeah, that's the output part. But before we output, we often want to translate our content, and this is where John comes in. I see this part here, but I stop here and we switch over to John to his environment, where he will show us how that works and how we can connect that with XTM.
Okay. Yeah, so we're going to jump into, before I jump into translating, actually submitting content from AEM Guides for translation. For those of you who may not be familiar with XTM at all, let me give you a very brief introduction to the Enterprise Translation Management System. It's a big application. There's a lot in it, so I'm not going to go through every detail. There's just a couple of concepts that I want to introduce you to that are really important. As I mentioned, it's a fully integrated system with that handles all of your translation workflow, assignments, online workbench, translation memory, glossary management, all of that. One of the important aspects that makes it scalable enough for the entire enterprise is a concept that we call customers in the system. And this is just a name we give for what is essentially a workspace within the bigger application. Okay, this is a very simple breakdown of marketing, product manuals, software development. There are actually a lot more quote unquote customers in this XTM account, but I'm logged in as the technical communications project manager for translation. So my primary responsibility is looking after product manuals. I also have access to marketing and software development assets like translation memory and terminology, because these different categories, there's a lot of content overlap between them. They share especially terms and glossary and keywords and phrases, but also a lot of translation memory content and translation content is shared between them. So one of the key aspects of the customer in XTM is user access control. As I mentioned, there's a bunch more of these. There's a lot in this system, but I only have responsibility for these three. So when I log in, this is all I see, and I'm not burdened with a lot of stuff that isn't relevant to me. The second one is, as I mentioned, each of these customers has its own database for translation memory data and glossary or terminology data. For those of you who know translation technology well, these are your primary translation assets to save you time and money on reusing validated translations you've done before, but you can share and cross-leverage these translation memories among the different customers with advanced penalization rules and all that good stuff. If you don't know what any of that means, don't worry about that right now. This is the translation side of the house. And the last piece is that each of these customers can have their own specific settings in the system. That's how we support all the different translation activities within a whole company. Everybody's going to have their own file types, their own translation workflows, possibly their own separate vendors, their own requirements, style guides, glossaries for their translation workflows, different schedules, and everything. And you can set all that up in XTM so that everybody has their own particular space to customize their translation workflow. And this is largely at the customer level here. The other important aspect, touching on the customizability question, is what we call project templates. And these will be relevant in AEM when you see it, but these are all of your standard translation workflows that you have. You want to create a project template. This is powerful for automation. So we're going to be looking today at my AEM Guides translation project template, which I've made customer specific. Every translation project that comes into XTM is assigned, it's for one of these customers. And this project template is only to be used by my product manuals team, right? I can also make it global. I have a couple of generic templates in the system that anybody can make use of, but this one is I've set up specifically for product manuals. It saves all of my data like source and target languages. We're going to go into German today for somewhat obvious reasons. There's a ton of settings in here that I'm not going to cover, but just to highlight, XTM is a very mature and powerful translation management system. If you've been involved in translation technology, you know how deep it gets very quickly. So there's a lot in here, but don't be intimidated by that. You're going to set it once, you're going to save it in a project template, and then you're going to automate on that basis. So I'm leveraging multiple customer translation memories in this project. I've got my custom workflows set up. We're going to do a simple two-step translation today for demo purposes. I've got machine translation integrated if you're using that for productivity purposes. And once my workflow is set up, I've just got the one target language here. I can preset my vendors, right? This is all about automation and saving time. If you always send the same content type in the same language to the same vendor, then don't make anybody click on that. Just preset it in the project template and automatically kick off this project. You can drive the entire translation process from within AEM, and your translation team can really just kind of oversee it and manage by exception, as they say. Just respond to questions, queries, that sorts of thing, which you can do using the instant built-in messenger and XTM, for example. So I wanted to show you those quickly. Let me switch over to AEM. And I'm not going to go through the whole install, but I want to show you a little bit of the configuration here, only for the purposes to make a couple of important points. One of which is that AEM, Adobe is also a very mature company that's been doing translation for a long, long time. So they have their own translation integration API, and XTM integrates with that. That's what this one is. It's a requirement, in fact. But the benefit here is that we can tie seamlessly into your content authoring workflows in AEM that require translation, because we're tying into the same paradigm that Adobe uses for translation, even independent of XTM. If you've been translating, we've had a connector to AEM for quite some years now, focused on the sites, the website content. If you're familiar with that, then you'll find the translation workflow very familiar, because it's pretty much all the same based on this API. So once our connector is installed, what you can do is all of this up here is just authentication information for the API calls between AEM and XTM. We successfully connect to the system. And then what you'll see down here again is, like I described, customers. So when this is pulled from the XTM account itself. When I send this out for translation, I'm going to create this project under my product manuals customer, and this is the project template that I'm going to use, the AEM Guides translation. Notice that I have a lot of other choices here. So this is going to automate the translation process, kicking it off according to what I have in here. But you can see a bunch of different configurations here in AEM. You can have them for different purposes. One example, a common example, is maybe you just want one process that is a fully automated machine translation round trip. You send content out, we apply whatever good validated matches we have from the translation memory, we automatically machine translate the rest, and we automatically send it back to you. This could be for pseudo translation purposes, testing of your sites or documents, things like that. And then you just select a different process when it's time to do the full proper translation. Or as Stefan explained about different audiences and things like that, you know, your end user facing content might have a different, more in-depth translation workflow than some internal stuff, something that's enough for gisting, what have you. So all that can be set up in here. And once you're ready to translate, then you're going to go to your content, just like Stefan showed. I'll come here, and I've got the same document, different system, but you'll see the English DITA content here. In my case, I've got some German already, right? We're trying to save a little time here in our demo. So what you'll see is this is a partially translated document. So our scenario today is that I've already translated this English document once, but now I've made some updates to it. Maybe I've got some new components. Maybe I've made some changes to the content. So again, I select my English content. We come back here where Stefan left off, and I say I want to translate this document into German, and I'm going to choose Apply. And it's going to parse and see what I've already got and what's missing. And I've got all my data here listed in a list. You can see, just like in sites, it creates copies of each file. So I've got my German versions here along with my English versions. And what I'm going to do is I can filter by all this helpful metadata, again, very semantically rich, to say, well, I just want to see what has a missing copy. Missing copy is the language copy. In other words, that file has not been translated yet. I've only got 2 components here that have not yet been translated for this document. So I'm going to go ahead and send those out. I filtered this list, and then I come back here and select them, and the Send for Translation button comes up. You've got various options here. If I were translating into more than one language at a time, I could create a multilingual project, which is going to, all the components are technically separate, but in XTM, we would create just one translation project, and it would look like you're translating the same content into multiple languages. We just have one, so I'm just going to create a new translation project. You have a lot of other options here, like adding more content to an existing translation project. It could be perhaps it's still in progress and some new content has come out, or this is kind of a continuous translation workflow. You've got a discrete document that you translate multiple times and you just make changes to, and you just want to keep the same project in XTM. You have lots of choices. So I'm just going to throw a quick project title on here and click Submit, and it's going to start sending that out. Now what's happening here is, again, if you're familiar with the translation workflow in AEM, what we've done so far is create a project in AEM. AEM has projects too, as you know, for managing the authoring and publishing of content. So I want to go to my projects view, and we'll see my new AEM demo way down here at the bottom of the list. And it's got a translation job in it for German. And notice that it's already committed for translation. So what we've done here for our demo is we're maximizing automation. And what you have a lot of options here that are configurable in AEM for translation. We don't want to step through them all necessarily, but perhaps if for each translation job you have to get a cost estimate and decide whether to go forward with that translation task, you can do that in AEM, because you can. One of the options up here is to, well, you don't see it anymore because we started the project. But one of them would be request the scope. And you can do this from within AEM itself, or the translation project manager could manage it on their end in XTM. But what that means is simply that you have the option of not kicking off the translation workflow automatically as soon as the project is created, like we've done today. You can stop, you can check, you can get a cost estimate, you can pull that data from XTM into AEM and make that decision and say, yeah, I've got budget for this or whatever. And then you can kick off the translation workflow right here from within AEM using these options here. Normally there'd be one called Start Project, but we've already done that. That's the beauty of context-sensitive UI. So when I switch back to XTM here and refresh my project list, I'll see my new AEM project into German that was created automatically, and it's already been started. I can see all of the project settings that were preset according to the project template, right? So there's no clicking around or messing with these. My translation memory metrics are all here. If you're familiar with this type of data, it gives you your scoping and cost data, which we can also have because our vendors and our pre-assigned vendors and our pre-established vendor translation rates are all here in XTM. So you don't have to wait for the vendor to receive a project, analyze it, send you a quote, debate about the quote and everything. This XTM is about putting control and ownership of the data in your hands. So everything happens automatically. Here in the translation workflow, I can see the files here sent for translation. And in fact, this green box here indicates that this task is active, which means it's already available for the vendor to translate. They've already been notified that they can begin work on this task. That's how the translation workflow works. Okay, and let me show you what that looks like from this end. What I'm doing is I'm going to log out to give you another view of how it looks in the translation system according to a particular user. I'm going to log in as the German translator who's been assigned to this task. And they've received a notification that they can begin work on this task. So when they log in, they have a completely different view. They have the tasks that are assigned to them. The active one is ready for me to execute on immediately. They can see planned tasks, which are tasks that are assigned to this user but not ready to execute yet. Perhaps the project hasn't started. Perhaps the workflow has not advanced to their particular workflow step yet. But they can see the volume, they can preview the content. It's just everything's locked at that point in time so that they can plan their workload to deliver things on time. They have a record of tasks that they've completed. The concordance search, if you're familiar with translation technology, concordance search is a reference search of translation memory so that they can check how certain words and phrases have been translated elsewhere within your content so that they can do it correctly. This is also embedded in the workbench itself, which I can access simply by clicking the task and opening up the translation workbench. I really just have a couple of strings here. I'd have integrated glossaries here in the workbench, terminology. If I had some, if I have access rights, this user, then I could add some of my own. My translation memory matches or my machine translation matches are here. So this is, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through all the features of the online translation tool. If you're familiar with CAT tools, computer assisted translation tools, XTM's is a full featured CAT tool in the cloud. So as I translate each and every segment in real time, it's saved into the TM. You get real time progress reporting on the project management side, etc. So all I'm going to do here really is finish this task so that I can illustrate something else to you. I had a task assigned to me. I finished it. It's done. I'm going to log out and log in again as the project manager just to show you how the workflow advances automatically. So on the translation side, you're saving an enormous amount of time. There's no downloading of files, emailing them out, receiving them back from the translator, emailing them out to the editor, etc. This workflow is advanced automatically to the next step in the workflow, and these users have been notified that they can accept this task, right? That's how the translation workflow advances automatically. In this case, I'm just going to finish this task from here. And when all the tasks are completed, they're all grayed out, this file is done, which means this project is done. And XTM is going to generate, you can see it happening here, it's going to automatically generate the output German file, and then the connector is going to start sending it back to AEM. And occasionally that just takes a few seconds to happen. While it's doing that, I'll give you a quick illustration of the possibilities of DITA within XTM. I talked a little bit about the special DITA features that we have in XTM, and I want to show you a little bit what that looks like. This is a different file different content. Because getting to this point, to be honest, can take a little bit of doing. We in XTM, I mentioned we can store an XSLT style sheet on your system that knows how to render your DITA content, so that you can have a visual mode, right? That requires a lot of customization, but it can look like this, right? The point is to give all this context to the translator at the time that they're translating your content. And again, here's the navigator I talked about. This is a document. You can see us parsing the document structure, and we just have really, in this case, a couple of, we don't have all of the files for this translation project because we don't need them all, right? But I can use that to navigate through the document. I think the key example here is not only does this give you a WYSIWYG view of the document you're translating while you're translating it, it helps the translator a lot, which I think will be obvious when they come to a segment like this one, that these are linked together. So if I click on this segment, I've got a C here, and I'm wondering what on earth this means, then I can see it in the table and go, oh, that's a table string, right? Whereas normally a translator would just be out there translating things like these funky strings and not having a, asterisk A. What on earth does that mean? I don't know, but I can see it here in its context and go, okay, well, this makes more sense now. And then they know what it is and how to deal with it. So that's an example of what we can do with the DITA content. As AEM updates itself, you can see the status here changed to translation in progress while the project was going. If I refresh this really quick, hopefully what I'm going to have is approved, because we can see, there it is, you can see the assets that are sent out for translation. And one of the options here is to automatically approve them as they return into AEM, right? Again, we set this demo for maximum automation, so we had content automatically approved when it comes back into AEM. And we can safely do that because our translators have full visual context while they're translating it on the translation side. So we can be confident that they haven't made a bunch of mistakes that we're going to have to go correct. The alternative is you can have the files returned into AEM in a ready for review status. And you may know this from your authoring workflows, that then you can check it out, you can preview it, look for any problems, and you can actually reject that translation, which sends it back to XTM again, reopens that translation workflow and says, hey, we need to make some changes here. But that's the basic round trip from AEM to XTM that we wanted to demonstrate for you today. So back to our slide deck. I hope we've made clear to you the value of two cloud systems. Again, this is all about building bridges between two enterprise systems in the cloud with a true bidirectional data flow and communication between the two systems so that you can take advantage of all the things that make your DITA content intelligent, structurally rich, semantically rich, discoverable, etc., and leverage all that efficiency as you go global. Into lots of different languages through XTM Cloud as well. As opposed to kind of the old days, Stefan and I have both been around long enough to remember the kind of monitored FTP site where you dump some files in a folder, they go out for translation, and then you just get them back, which worked well for automating file transfers, but it doesn't get you all this other intelligent content data that we can make use of today.
Yeah, I mean, it's of course, such a hot folder thing can work to a certain extent, but there are limitations compared to an integration that works with the two APIs of these systems. Because all this project metadata, like deadlines and things like this, and assigning tasks and so on, this is possible in such an online scenario with two cloud systems that are connected through APIs with each other and talk bi-directional with each other. And a hot folder thing is more or less unidirectional thing, and all this metadata, project metadata, and so is missing there. And that's just a huge difference, and it happens all live in real time then. And AM can update the status, etc., in real time. So a lot of advantages of such a solution over hot folders, or even worse, sending files around by email. And that's a completely different setup here. Yeah, very cool. I also really like, John, that XTM is using ITS. You mentioned that, and we have that in Adobe FrameMaker as well, with our own XLIF filter that we have built into FrameMaker and RoboHelp. And SRX, segmentation rule exchange. So that's also possible for those of you who do not work with AIM yet, but are already working with DITA and with FrameMaker as a desktop DITA editor. Check out the XLIF editor that we have embedded since FrameMaker 2020 release, where you can use ITS rules to customize the XLIF transformation, and SRX to create pre-segmented XLIF files based on your own segmentation rules. So very powerful feature there as well. Okay, yeah, I think we're pretty much at the end, right? You might have noticed
we could go on for hours, but maybe we should.
We could go on for hours, right? But we are already good over time, I think. You noticed, for those of you who have attended the live webinar, you might have noticed that it was slightly different a little bit here and there, because we just re-recorded the webinar. Unfortunately, during the live webinar, we had forgotten to hit the record button. So now we had to re-record this again. So it's slightly different. And of course, we don't have that real Q&A session now that we had during the live webinar. So we can skip that. But John, you have something to announce as well, right?
I do, yes. I would be remiss if I did not plug our XTM Live user conference. It's coming up in London this time. We alternate generally between Europe and the U.S. This coming April. We're all glad to be back out in person. It's a 2-day event, always a lot of fun. We do advanced training for XTM users. Even if you're not an XTM user, you're welcome to join us and network with people who are XTM users. It's all about translation technology in general, XTM in particular, solving issues, and learning from people who are using the system.
Wonderful, good event. I hope I will be able to join you guys in London as well.
I hope to see you there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically it for today. And feel free to reach out to us. If you want to get a personalized demo of XTM or a personalized demo of AM, or maybe even a combination of both, feel free to reach out to John and me, and we will be happy to set something up for you guys and show you the solution and explain the use case and value for your specific scenario and your specific enterprise requirements. And with that, John, thanks for being my guest today. It was a
Thank you
pleasure
for
to
having
have
me.
you.
Thanks for everyone's time and attention. I hope it was informative. It was fun for me.
Yeah. It was fun for me as well. I really enjoyed it, and always fun to present with you, John. So yeah, thanks everyone who watched this recording, and thanks to all those who attended the live webinar, and see you next time.